They have big and small things, so it's been incredibly rewarding.
Okay, and Paige, you are a Grand Rapids documenter. Can you tell us a little bit about why you joined the program? And for the folks who are watching that aren't familiar with the Documenters program, just a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so my reason for joining, I'm a writer by trade. I also went to Grand Valley State University, but in film. And then since living here post-graduation, I've just been becoming more connected with the community and just like wanting to know more. So a friend recommended the program to me, and I was just like, wow, this is really cool. Kind of just the Documenters program, you can kind of pick and choose which meetings you want to, kind of based on your schedule. And so that's what's really convenient for me, is like I just kind of pick up as what interests me or what's convenient for my schedule to kind of put it in. But yeah, so like just getting involved more and being more aware, as I've lived here only a couple of years now, so I'm just like, how else can I become more aware and like jump in on those stories and my own personal interests in the community.
And for you, you typically cover Corridor Improvement Authority meetings. What interested you in covering CIAs, and could you tell us a little bit about what CIAs are for those who aren't familiar?
Yeah, a lot of what they do is CIAs, they support and fund business districts that are within the corridor. So there are 6 of them. I have covered 5 out of the 6. I think the West Side is the only one I have not. But a lot of what they do is like facade improvement or just like events that get people to come out to business districts or get involved in that kind of way. And what was interesting to me about that kind of work was that, similar to kind of what you said, like just living in some of those neighborhoods, like I live in the North Quarter or that area, like Creston neighborhood. So I was just like, wow, like all of this stuff is like happening like right next to me. So all those like kind of super specific meetings just were, I don't know, really interesting, and they're just really small too, so not talked about enough.
Those hyper local ones. I think the one on Michigan Street is even held at Grand Coney.
Yes, it's really fun.
I love that. I think in one of your notes you even included, or maybe someone submitted audio once where you could hear a blender in the back.
Yeah, that's happened quite a bit. Yeah. They're still like actively like serving people, and then in the back room they have to make milkshakes. Like, just a second, like, sorry, but yeah, it's
I love that. And for you, Justin, you're not covering meetings, but you're going out and chasing your own stories. You haven't necessarily stuck to a single beat or topic at the Rapidian, but what kind of stories do you cover?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, and to my point, what I was saying earlier, I think a great thing about being a Rapidian reporter is if you have eclectic interest as an individual, and the variety of things you would want to read, well then that's your motivation. So so like I've reached out to a lot of folks involving sports, and then so for example, I just interviewed the head coach for Grand Rapids Rise, which was great, and then even community college, so the Grand Rapids Community College basketball team.
That was your first article.
That was my first story, yeah. That was over a year ago. And then even things like entertainment. So like I covered a heavy metal band that came here, Saxon. They came here earlier this year, and we got to cover that concert that was happening. We got to even interview the artist, which was fantastic and really unexpected. But even more like locally in my actual vicinity, there was some like local businesses that new and old ones. Particularly, there was a new pottery studio coming into a long vacant building in my neighborhood, and I was just walking past the building one day, and it's been vacant for like 5 years, and I was like, oh, something's happening here. I need to know what's going on here, and it happened to be a pottery studio. Got to reach out to them and really talk to them about their, them starting their dreams, which was amazing to hear. And I think they really respected the coverage as well. So I think it was really rewarding for both of us.
Is there a meeting that you've covered, Paige, that you found particularly interesting, or any policy that you've covered, I guess, in these meetings that you're?
Yeah. I would say this was a couple of months ago, but there was a Southtown CIA meeting that I covered that had to do with, they were talking about restructuring the parking on the street near, I believe it is Eastern and Burton, right near Harvest Health, because there's a lot of angled parking there, and they're already under construction at the moment. But that meeting in particular, it's usually like there's a handful of us who sit in the meetings other than the board members. But that one garnered a lot of like community interest from local businesses, like, and speaking with like Grand Rapids Engineering of like why and how they're doing this construction, possibly switching the parking to parallel parking there, and like how would that affect traffic. And yeah, I just learned quite a bit, and it was like probably an hour-long conversation specifically on that one particular topic. And there was a lot, they gave the floor to the community a lot to, you know, express their concerns, and looking towards the board also for like how is this all going to work. So that one was like quite interesting because there was just like a lot going on.
Yeah.
A lot of good conversation.
I think the cool thing about documentaries and what makes a good documenter is that curiosity, even about small, typically boring things like talking about parking. Who wants to talk about parking? But then when you hear about how it impacts the vitality of businesses and the walkability of a neighborhood, then you can kind of see yourself in that neighborhood. Like you understand, because you shop at that store, you walk down those sidewalks, and it's not just parking anymore. I really found that meeting interesting too. So, Justin, I know you talked a little bit about it. Sometimes you're just stumbling across stories like you did on your walk. But how else do you decide on which issues or events you want to cover?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's important to point out too that sometimes, like the Rapidian, you know, you'll come to me with stories if you hear tips about things that are happening in the city. But kind of to my point too about my interest, I think I am trying to pick a story that, like I said, that I know I'm going to read, and that I know that, like, I don't have very niche interest, I don't think. So I think a lot of my interest would appeal, I think, and especially too when it's something that I know I could talk about with a group of people anywhere, which is primarily the topics that I try to cover, which is why, you know, events is something that's really a really easy go-to. But like I said, though, like I think when you get to spotlight like really local folks, I think people really appreciate getting reached out to and having their story told. And I think that the longer I've done this, the more I found that to be the case. So I think it's really excelled my interest in reaching out to folks for stories that I know typically wouldn't get covered, or at least get covered with as much attention as what I know I can give them. So
yeah, one of those stories in particular was on Long Road Distillery here on the west side of town. And what I thought was interesting, and if I'm misremembering, correct me, but the story you got and the story you kind of led into is not the story you were really reaching out to them to get.
That's true. That's a good pull. That's kind of part of it, right? So I feel like that if you're reaching out, like I said, with things that you personally may even potentially be interested in, you absolutely never know what someone's going to say to you. I reached out to the Long Road Distillery about an event that they were co-participating with Celebration Cinemas here in Grand Rapids, and they didn't end up getting back to me because I found out that they were sourcing juniper berries on an island up north in Michigan, and I was like, okay, that's crazy. I need to know more about that. So then I just got to have a conversation with an individual from there, and found out all these incredible things about how they're sourcing, not even just from Michigan, but sourcing from West Michigan. And I think, okay, well, this is the story. So we really got to dive into that and sort of spotlight that specific topic that I wasn't even considering for a story at first. But again, like I was saying earlier, I learned so much from that it was indispensable. It was fantastic.
So we're running out of time for this segment, but I want to open this question up to both of you. How do you think your work as a documenter, as a reporter, has made a difference in your community or influenced local conversations, whether big or small? Or if it's had an impact on you personally, what was that like? Whoever wants to answer that.
I would say it's definitely got me talking more to my friends, other people in my life who maybe I wouldn't have known about these subjects at all, or I hear like a little inkling of something and I was like, oh, is that a meeting? Like whatever about this, and just like kind of opening that conversation up more and just inform and spread awareness about these super specific topics that maybe most people would be like, I have no idea, and just kind of like disregard. But then, I don't know, yeah, opening that conversation has been really cool.
Cool. Justin?
Yeah, I can say that my calendars now are exploded with events. I feel like I know everything that's going
Yes.
on now.
Yeah, that too.
So that's kind of great. I have a lot of great weekend plans. But yeah, I think also too, I think like beyond a personal level, I got to, we were kind of talking about this earlier, but I got to help spread the word about someone who was opening a pottery studio, and they've wanted to do it for years and years and years. And when I reached out to them, they were really excited about it. And I think it really helped them, like I said, spread the word about what they have been wanting to do for forever. And that was really rewarding, I think. And like I was saying earlier, that kind of has excelled me to reach out to more even hyper-local folks. But yeah, to see your impact like that is amazing. And also, too, I feel like for them, they're probably not getting reached out to by a lot of news. So I think that it's just got to be helpful for them. Like, it's got to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you both for talking with me about the work that you do. And thank you, first and foremost, for the work that you do. I learn a lot just from the two of you and the rest of the folks in the Rapidian Reporter Program and the Grand Rapids Documentaries Program. So thank you for that great conversation about both of these programs and how they help share important untold stories here in Grand Rapids and connect folks with local government here in Grand Rapids. So next we'll talk with 3rd Ward Commissioner-elect Marshall Kilgore about the role of local news in building stronger connections in our community and the importance of local journalism and government.
It's morning in Grand Rapids. Do you know what's going on in your city? Stay informed about what's happening in your community with The Rapidian, your source for hyper-local news and information. The Rapidian is a community-focused news source powered by local residents like you. Our volunteer writers and reporters create content that hits close to home about topics like local government, business, schools, events, and people. The Rapidian goes beyond the headlines to provide in-depth coverage of issues that affect Grand Rapids directly, so you can stay in the know. We aim to uplift the community by sharing positive, inspiring stories of growth, progress, and neighborhood pride. The Rapidian is your neighborhood newspaper for the digital age. Follow us on our website and social media to stay connected to your community. This is The Rapidian.
The Rapidian is a hyper-local news source powered by, for, and of the people of Grand Rapids, Michigan. We launched in 2009 using funds from local organizations and generous donors, and this community-driven platform empowers residents to share their stories, post articles, and keep track of local events and issues. By emphasizing citizen journalism, the Rapidian provides a unique grassroots perspective and a vital news service for the residents of Grand Rapids. In 2023, we are relaunching the Rapidian with the Grand Rapids Documentaries Program, where we train and pay local citizens to cover public meetings, empowering residents with the tools and resources to strengthen the news media landscape in Grand Rapids and become more civically engaged.
Welcome back. In this segment, we're joined by Marshall Kilgore, the 3rd Ward Commissioner-elect. We'll talk about the role of local journalism in the 3rd Ward and how it helps connect the community. Let's jump in.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really happy to get this relationship started. I am huge on supporting local journalism, local news, hyper-local news, so I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is all our first time. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, so I guess I'll ask this. So
Sure.
you just recently won a really competitive race in the third ward.
Yes.
Pretty recently. It feels like the election was just like yesterday.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, crazy.
Who's counting?
But so I want to point out too that obviously you're new, you're quite young. Not a lot of folks
The
probably know who
youngest
you are.
commissioner ever, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I didn't know that. See, this is why we talk to folks.
Lots of history. Youngest commissioner-elect ever, commissioner yet for GR, and the first openly LGBTQ plus commissioner for the city of Grand Rapids.
Gotcha. So then, okay, you're pretty young. How did you get here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
How'd you get here right now?
Yeah, so I'm a fourth generation Grand Rapidian. So my family has lived and loved on the south side for 4 generations. I live in the historical Martin Luther King Park neighborhood. I love my nearly 100-year-old home, but I'm a human rights advocate. So that's been my journey to public service. And people call this politics. I like to call it public service. I have always been someone who is passionate about helping the underdog. I call them frontline communities. So my work has been in the nonprofit sector. I've also done civic outreach. I've worked for folks like Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2018 as her deputy field organizer for the west side of the state, and most recently helped get the first Black woman on the Michigan Supreme Court as Justice Kyra Harris Bolden's community relations director. So my work has been going to places like Lansing, DC, organizing locally and civically to uplift frontline communities. So that can be women, the elderly, youth, people who are differently abled, BIPOC communities, and my community, the LGBTQ plus community. So that's where a lot of folks know me from, or through osmosis, is me fighting and rallying for folks to have a fair fighting chance here in our state and in the world.
Oh, wow. That was a good answer.
I'm so proud to do the work. I really am. And I'm humbled by this opportunity now just to continue to help my neighbors.
That's great. So I guess, yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah. So from your perspective, why is hyperlocal journalism important for the Third Ward?
Yeah, well, I think it's important for the community at large, right? But especially the Third Ward that has some historical issues. Let's take public and private investment, for example, right? Of us getting sort of the short end of the stick for so many years, for decades. So work that you all are doing and hyper-local news outlets are doing is so important to highlight those things, bring them to light. And education and awareness, I firmly believe, is a part of most of our challenges. If we can raise the awareness, let people know what the problem is, and then educate ourselves further about the challenge, we can really work through almost anything, in my opinion. And there was a blog, I forgot which blog, but they had talked about how many times that the bigger news outlets covered Art Prize, right? Which is beautiful and awesome. But then in comparison to local races like mine, we had less than 10 news hits. So we have to educate folks. We have to raise awareness about folks like myself who now are a member of a body who just passed a $690 million budget. So that's why the work that you all do is so important and necessary for a community that's engaged and just educated and aware of what's going on.
That's great.
Yeah.
I didn't know 690 million.
It's huge. It's a big budget.
that's
Yeah.
outrageous, yeah.
And I would have loved, that's the relationship I want to continue to have with folks like you all and talking about what that budget looks like.
Right.
So I guess kind of on that, let's talk about Third Ward for a minute.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things happening in Grand Rapids right now as far as, construction alone. But there's a lot of new projects happening. Most of them are centrally located to downtown.
Yeah.
Soccer stadium, riverfronts, revitalization, amphitheater, what have you. But as far as the Third Ward is concerned, that's that's outside of that, right? So coming in now, like, what do you see like are some really important challenges facing the third ward that you would like to address now that you're elected?
Well, first I can start with all of those big projects have a tax revenue that we will receive from them. So the third ward will get tax revenue from those huge projects, which is awesome. I think of the Three Towers project that's coming up, right, which was sitting on a vacant lot. So we were getting nothing from some of these places just being blight or vacant. So, that's always a positive. But, there have been third ward commissioners in the past. I think of Commissioner Sunita Lanier boycotting when they had meetings about these big projects developing, because this is a trend that I've seen and that I'm going to try my hardest to combat once I'm there come January, of why do we have all of this wonderful development and the third ward is getting overlooked, right? And it is a part of our community master plan that we are in the process of approving. The city commission is for the next 20 years, right, of having strong neighborhoods. And a part of having strong neighborhoods is making sure that there's an equity layer there when we talk about these big projects. So my hope is to be able to pull some of those big projects and get us, the third ward, a win. That would be stellar, and it would also be equitable, because we have been left behind decade after decade. And I believe that my colleague, Kelsey Perdue, I just always sing her praises. She's stellar. And I believe that together we can work to get some new businesses, some new business districts, or support our business districts and get some new projects in.
Wow, sure.
That's the hope.
Yeah, that's the, well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work. I think a lot of community folks have to get involved, I assume, too. I think, which seems to be, that was part of your campaign as well.
Yeah, like I plan to do a listening tour. So my barbershop, the main attraction right on 28th Street, I said, can I use this space to, maybe not just get my hair cut, but to do a listening tour and to hear what constituents care about and to hear what I call them our neighbors in the third ward. I want to hear what they care about. I want to hear what they think. What should certain aspects of that $690 million budget, what should that look like in the third ward? Right. And what would you like me to lift at the dais for you?
Yeah, and I guess kind of to follow up on that, like how can local journalism help address these challenges?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been loving seeing, is it the documenters who go to these meetings that are not sexy by any means, but I love them, right? So I was already there, and when I saw that, giving people stipends or just encouraging people to go to these meetings and just giving a good rundown of bullet points of here's what's going on. Now, before this, I talked about my human rights advocacy at the state, at the federal level, but I also served on 3 civilian boards for the city. Oh. For example, I was the chair of the Vital Streets Oversight Commission, which helped push through $50 million in infrastructure projects. So, that type of work is so important to be covered so people can see where their tax dollars are going and where their community is headed.
Absolutely. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah,
I guess.
go for it.
I guess I was cooked up.
Yeah.
Urban agriculture. You have a good deal of experience there, and it was also environmental justice was part of your campaign as well, which was really kind of almost, I would say, unique to see for someone that was running for a ward seat. Just in that you were very outspoken about it. So. This is a very specific question, hyper local news, so I guess it's a hyper specific question. But urban agriculture, I think green space has been something that's being talked a lot about around the city, not just in the third ward, but all around, or lack thereof, or the addition, what have you. But as far as green spaces in urban agriculture is concerned, a lot of community gardens even popping up around the city. What are your takes on it? Do you have any plans in the third ward to maybe push that forward as well?
Yes, 100%. I'm happy that, how much time do we have, right? Yes, that was a huge part of my platform, but it's a huge part of my belief. Oop, I shouldn't hit the mic. It's a huge part of my belief because, I'm looking at these issues and I knocked tens of thousands of doors with my team and community members, tens of thousands. And what folks talked about is education, mental health, safety. We have to look at these issues in a holistic perspective. So I'm not just a tree hugger saying that everyone should be excited about trees and our tree canopy and backyard bees and chickens, which I helped pass that ordinance with the City Commission as a member of the Urban Agriculture Committee. That was also one of the 3 that I was on. So I'm really excited about that. I also want to highlight that the 3rd Ward has about a dozen less green spaces, parks, than the 1st and 2nd Ward. So when we look at what does green space do for us, right? When you can have a stressful day and after work you know you have a park to go to, and before you know it you're walking, and at first you're stomping, and after an hour you're feeling lighter. I want that for our neighbors. Our neighbors need that. And what we're seeing is folks are increasingly lonely, and they're increasingly upset about certain worldly issues, right? Such as the new administration at the federal level. So I want people to be able to make community and help their mental health with those green spaces, and in turn combat some of the things, such as if we develop too much, then we also increase our heat, right? I could go further, I won't try to get too granular, but we have to have balance to these things with a city. And I want to make Grand Rapids more walkable to get us away from those carbon emissions that our cars make, you know? So I could talk about that for 5 hours.
No, thanks for your response. I really appreciate it.
Thank
And
you for your
actually,
question.
I think honestly, the response was like perfect time, because I think we're just about out of time.
Oh, it's been so
but I will
much
say
fun.
though, really, I was just going to say we could have done this for hours.
Yeah,
but
right.
I really appreciate
Yeah,
you coming
fun.
here.
Thank you.
And also too, we really hope that with the young folks too. I think we were kind of talking about this before the show. Pretty great to see some young folks out there.
First Gen Z commissioner. I mean,
That's pretty cool.
It is very cool. I'm deeply humbled. I'm deeply humbled and just ready to serve and listen. I'm ready to listen and be teachable.
Yeah,
Well,
perfect.
Glad to have you here. But we're going to end there. So thanks for watching this episode of GRCMC In Focus. We've learned more about the Rapidian and how it's helping the residents share their stories and stay engaged. But thanks for joining us, and see you next time.